Hi, this is John Rowell for the Rowell Report. Today is Friday, December 26, 2025, and welcome to my channel. I hope you're having a wonderful Christmas holiday break, and I wish you safe travels wherever you go and a safe return home. So today in this video, I will be talking about Zelensky's 20-point peace plan and to see how that fits within the whole peace process. So let's go through the 20-point peace plan as quickly as possible, and then we'll talk a little bit about its implication in this whole peace process, whether it moves us down the road or not, or whether it puts us in reverse gear going down a mountain cliff. So anyway, we start off with point number 1, recognition of Ukraine's full sovereignty and territorial integrity. So this could be understood in several ways. First, the full territorial integrity. So basically Ukraine is asking Russia to recognize that Ukraine is Crimea. Ukraine is everything before 2014 when Crimea split off from Ukraine. Is that what this means? Does this mean once a new border is set? So, but I understand this, if this is what Ukraine says, is that their Ukrainians have said, the head of the Ukrainian Rada said, I believe it was in Sweden, possibly Sweden or Norway, that they're never going to cede any territory of Ukraine to Russia. So Zelenskyy said the same thing. The ultranationalists have said the same thing. Most Ukrainians who are interviewed say the same thing. Of course, they're part of the misinformation network that the FSB puts out for us. But in any case, there are a large number of Ukrainians who agree that they're not willing to cede anything of Ukraine to Russia, and some say because, all the lives that were lost, we can't allow it. Also, this could be understood in another way. This is recognition of Ukraine's full sovereignty. So during the Minsk process, Ukraine had committed to allowing autonomy for the ethnic Russian Ukrainians, and then they did not follow up with that. In fact, they had gone 8 years between 2014, 2022, the Russians tried during that period to resolve the situation of the ethnic Russians in Ukraine. And so is this recognition of Ukraine's full sovereignty basically mean that Ukraine can discriminate against any and all ethnic minorities and ethnic and minority languages, religions, cultures, media, businesses, etc. So this number 1, it seems so straightforward. Yeah, this is the easiest point of all. Just sign off on it. No, when you take a look at that, that actually says something else. It says Ukraine can do in its territory anything it wants to any ethnic minority. Also, Ukraine is Crimea. Ukraine are the Lugansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson Oblast in their entirety. So Russia's never going to sign off on that. So right away we know that we were into a kind of an eggnog party, or they were doing shots at the bar, and then they decided to sit down and write this because right away from point number 1, this is not a serious peace plan proposal. Number 2, a binding non-aggression agreement between Ukraine and Russia. Well, basically the point is that the Western narrative of Russia is that it went into Ukraine because it had so much aggression it didn't know what to do with it. So it had to take it out on somebody, and they found poor little innocent Ukraine just doing its own business, um, not hurting anyone, not hurting a fly. So, and then Russia comes with all its aggression and it invades Ukraine. So that is the point of the Western narrative. So this basically mirrors that. And so if Russia were to sign off on that, basically say, oh, we're in Ukraine because of aggression, and we're gonna tone that down in the future. So that's a non-starter. 3. Long-term international security guarantees for Ukraine. Security guarantees from who? I mean, they already have more than 20 signed security agreements with different countries. How many more do they need? But in any case, this is like undefined, so it's kind of a non-starter. But the basic idea is that the best security guarantee for Ukraine is neutrality. If they accept neutrality, they will be in the best possible position for the future. A defined peacetime cap on Ukraine's armed forces at 800,000. That was, I believe, the point. So 800,000, that's almost the size of the Russian military. So it looks like we're still in war mode. So this isn't a peace agreement. This is like a next stage, next level war preparation. So there's really no cap at 800,000 because you have the active, you have the volunteer, you have the National Guard, you have your FSB, you have maybe some other corps. So, Ukraine's military forces could be in the several million and still stay under the so-called cap. So Russia isn't going to sign off on anything like that. Article 5 style collective defense guarantees. No, Russia's not going to sign off on that. I don't even know why it's in here, but like I say, this is Christmas. The eggnog is flowing, and everybody's having fun, enjoying themselves, and say, we need Article 5 security guarantees. And everyone knows if there's Article 5 security guarantees, the U.S. has to reply to some squabble going on in the middle of Ukraine. That means we're going to escalate quickly to nukes, and nobody wants that. So why put that in there in the first place? Russia formally commits to non-aggression toward Ukraine in Europe. But the purpose of the war from the Russian point of view isn't aggression. Maybe you don't agree with it, but you have to understand it at least. Otherwise, there's no sense of trying to make a peace deal because there's no language we can talk with which we can understand each other. The Russians went into Ukraine. It was an existential threat to have NATO on their border, but also for Ukrainian ultranationalists who hate anything Russia to be constantly shelling and attacking Luhansk, Donetsk, and other parts of the ethnic Russian areas, where people were constantly under threat. Russia finally said, we're not going to put up with that anymore. And they didn't have the military ready. This wasn't like they planned, to have this conflict, but it just happened. The die was cast, and they needed to carry out their aims so that they could secure what they understand is their national security. And if you think about it, why does the United States have Hawaii? Hawaii was a nation which was taken over by the United States. Why does the United States need Hawaii? For national security. Why does Trump want Greenland? For national security. Okay, and is Greenland at all connected to the United States? Is Hawaii at all connected to the United States? No, they're very far apart from each other. But Ukraine is right next to Russia. So if, from the Russian point of view, you have this very Russia-phobic country with some neo-Nazi tendencies and some really nasty people, and they're going to um, associate themselves with the CIA, with the MI6. Eventually, they'll get missiles in Ukraine pointing at Moscow. Okay, so for Russia, it was a true existential threat. You may not agree with it, but it was. So they had to act accordingly. Now, if Russia doesn't need Ukraine for their security, then the United States doesn't need Hawaii, and it certainly doesn't need Greenland. But the United States could start by giving away Hawaii, the Marshall Islands, Guam, and all these other territories that they have. And you say, no, never. They can never give them away. It's our national security. We have to secure the Pacific. Okay, these islands are thousands of miles away, or maybe 800 miles away. But in any case, it's not on your border. So it doesn't. So something that happens 1,500 miles away from your border isn't going to be a national security threat. But, somehow with the Western mentality, Ukraine is never a threat to Russia, but something in Hawaii or something in Guam or something in the Marshall Islands is a threat to the United States. So anyway, there's some real problem of logic here. But again, we get so accustomed to the Western narrative, everything we need, and we get to tell everybody else what they don't need and what's not important. So again, these documents, they're not really pushing us forward, but let's continue on. So point number 7, a clear pathway for Ukraine's membership in the European Union. Well, this will Russia said they're okay with this, but this will exist as long as the European Union doesn't morph into some militaristic organization like NATO. 8, a comprehensive international reconstruction and development program for Ukraine. Who's going to pay for that? The Europeans, who are having problems with debt. They're deindustrializing. Their countries are collapsing economically. The United States. Is the United States going to pay for the reconstruction of Ukraine? No, probably not. So who's supposed to pay for the reconstruction? Of course, this is reparations time. Russia's supposed to pay the reparations to Ukraine, and Russia's winning. So I guess the winner of the war pays reparations to the country that loses. Or am I understanding that incorrectly? I mean, the Western narrative, again, it's just out of control. That there's just, this is like eggnog party fuel, the euphoria. And so we go on to number 9, large-scale humanitarian economic recovery funding. Okay, who's supposed to pay for that? Germany, France, the UK. The UK, they don't even have enough money to, take care of their own infrastructure. You remember that last Christmas there was a substation that went kaboomy next to the Heathrow airport, and then they said, oh, it's Russian interference, Russian operatives, they went in and they did all this stuff. No, it was just lack of maintenance because they don't have the money. So where are they supposed to get the money from? Of course, it comes from Russia reparations, but Russia isn't going to accept or pay any reparations. Expanded trade agreements. This has nothing to do with a peace deal. Why put it in there? It's just like filler. 11. Ukraine remains a non-nuclear state under international agreements. Well, let's understand this maybe another way. Ukraine does not seek to acquire nuclear weapons. But what happens if some country just happens to donate nuclear weapons to Ukraine? Like the United States could put nuclear weapons in Ukraine, and Ukraine said, no, these aren't our weapons. They're the United States weapons. We're just going to give them a place for them to put that. So, non-nuclear state under national agreements. And of course, they could go back on that after day 2 or day 1. Secure internationally supervised operation of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is securely within the Russian-controlled area. The Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is controlled by Russia, and Russia will eventually take the whole Zaporizhzhia Oblast either through a negotiation or on the battlefield. So all of Zaporizhia Oblast will be a part of Russia. So why would they be giving away the power plant to anyone, and especially to the United States? Why would they do that? That's ridiculous. Okay, 13. Cultural, educational, and humanitarian cooperation to reduce long-term hostility. This is these famous educational programs like the George Soros Free Society is going to come in, or the National Endowment for Democracy, or USAID is going to show up, and they're going to come in with this wonderful educational program to teach the Russians to stop being aggressive to their neighbors and to seek peace. Okay, well, these same groups that would be making this educational program were already in Ukraine since the early 90s, creating educational programs, and through their educational programs, they commandeered their educational programs. Then they began to expand their network until they took over the whole country. The 2014 Maidan Revolution was basically a U.S.-sponsored coup. So basically they want to do the same thing in Russia. And meanwhile, they're going to teach Russians, the people in Ukraine aren't your enemies. Maybe, they'll teach the people in Moscow, the people in Vladivostok are your enemies. And the people in Vladivostok, they'll teach them, the people in Moscow are your enemies. So Russia's not going to allow for any stupid George Soros Free Society educational program to show up on their doorstep. And certainly not to include that in any kind of educational program. 14. Negotiated territorial arrangements based on ceasefire lines and further talks. This is the crux of this whole document. The freeze plan from Kellogg. This is General Kellogg coming back from retirement and coming forward and saying, I am the master of the peace plan. So anyway, we have this Kellogg-inspired 14. This is really the main point. This is what they want. They want the freeze plan. Then they can bring in the Western forces. Then they can work on a 10-year plan to attack Russia again, to try to push them out of what they consider Ukraine. And so Russia's not going to ever accept that. So why put it in? 15. A permanent commitment not to change borders by force. No one can make that, especially not the United States. How many times has the U.S. changed its border by force? We talk about the quote-unquote Indian Wars, the U.S.-Mexico War, the takeover of Hawaii. The one place that they did acquire through legal means was Alaska. They paid for it. But much, and of course the Louisiana Purchase, they bought that from the French because the French had Haiti. Hey, what do we need if we already have Haiti? We don't need anything else. We'll keep Haiti and we'll be rich forever. So anyway, those crazy French. But anyway, no country can make this commitment, especially the United States is not committed to this, and this is a proxy war between the United States and Russia using Ukraine. So why would Russia ever commit to that? 16. Freedom of navigation and commerce in the Black Sea and major waterways. The U.S. is showing its tremendous ability to respect the freedom of navigation in a place outside in the Caribbean, outside of Venezuela. They're bombing fishermen. They're taking over oil-carrying ships, and they're also, involved in these attacks on Russian vessels. So why would Russia ever agree to anything like that at all? And remember, this is a proxy war between the United States and Russia. So Ukraine is just a means for the United States to try to demilitarize, to weaken Russia. And so Russia will never agree to that, especially if Russia will be taking over the Black Sea once this conflict is over. So full prisoner exchanges and return of detained civilians. Okay, full prisoner exchanges. So Russia has prisoners of war from the Azov, brigade or battalion or whatever it is, that were involved in war crimes. They're criminals, they're in jail, and they won't be released anytime soon. So I doubt that they would give that up and sign this agreement, because they would not want them included in this group of people. 18. Democratic elections in Ukraine following implementation of the peace agreement. Tell me how we are going to do democratic elections in Ukraine. So after the Maidan coup, many political parties in Ukraine, most of them, 2/3 of them, or even more than that, 5-6 of the political parties were canceled. They were nullified, and so these political parties need to be able to be resurrected. They need to be able to do their campaigns. They need to have campaign funding. They need to be able to freely express themselves. None of this is going to happen right now in the current situation. And so you need a long time for these political parties to find their candidates, to come up with their platform, to be able to present their platform. So if you're just talking about taking the current political parties that were approved by the CIA, MI6, ultra-nationalists, then that's not a democratic process. So it won't be a democratic election. So I ask again, how are democratic elections supposed to take place in Ukraine? So I don't think that that's really possible at this point. They'll need a long time for these political parties to be able to promote themselves, to get their message out, to find people who will support their political work and to sign on to their platform, and then to get the message out. And all these political parties have been disappeared. Many of their leaders have been either left the country or they've been mobilized to the front lines or whatever. So they're going to have to start from scratch. So anyway, I don't see this process happening quickly at all. 19. A legally binding international peace treaty with enforcement mechanisms. Okay, well, the enforcement mechanisms, of course, are the US, UK, European powers. They're going to come in for round 2 to try to take on Russia. And so really there's no enforcement mechanisms. This is just all, smoke and mirrors by the same people that are running the war right now. Finally, an immediate and comprehensive ceasefire upon ratification of the agreement. So again, we go back to the whole ceasefire thing. No, once the conflict is over and the lines are drawn, that's it. We will know where is Russia and where is Ukraine, and no more discussions. And if Ukraine is going to try to retake some of that territory, then everything is off the table. So anyway, I don't think that Ukraine is capable of observing any ceasefire. Maybe they are. But anyway, going back to the 20-point peace plan, does this help us move forward or move back? This is like the car, that doesn't have brakes, and it going down a very steep road, and there's no off-ramp, so they can safely slow down and stop. This only pushes us into, the extremes. So really, am I angry or mad about these 20-point peace plan? No, because this benefits, Russia. And the sooner that Russia gets to its goals, the sooner this conflict will be over. There's no power on earth that can force Russia to give up on their goals of their special military operation. So really, the sooner they get to the goals, the better. And if Ukraine wants this conflict to end, then okay, sign on to that. You still have 80% of your country left, and but it's going to be less and less the longer you wait. And eventually, Russia will get to Zaporizhia, we'll get to Kherson, we'll get to Odessa, and then Russia will cut off all access to the Black Sea. Ukraine will have all this grain, and it has to move it either through Romania or through Poland, and so it'll become a rump state. It'll be saddled with all this debt, and will only be able to really, carry out smaller commerce amounts that will never be able to pay back the debt that they have, and then they'll default on that. Their currency will become valueless. The inflation will spike, and then Ukraine will collapse. And once it collapses, then Russia may, move in to try to keep the country from going into a civil war. So then, in the end, Russia wins anyway. So why not try to find the best scenario where Russia feels that its national security interests are fulfilled, and Ukraine can develop a healthy future. So, but anyway, these are all individuals that want the war to continue, because as long as the war continues, what they call the grift continues, the golden toilets will multiply, and the villas in the French Riviera, the Maserati, Lamborghini, Rolls Royces will flourish throughout the planet, especially in Monaco and Dubai, and other parts of the world. So maybe, some people, they'll continue to scoop off the foam at the top and pocket it. In any case, this conflict is not ending anytime soon, and certainly isn't helped by this 20-point peace plan, which I went through, and really there's no real point here where Russia can agree to. Maybe one or two they can work with. The rest is just, Western narrative on steroids. So anyway, that is my report on the 20-point peace plan. If you have any comments to make, please do so below. And if you like this video, please hit the like button, share, and subscribe. And I look forward to seeing you back on future videos. Take care. Bye-bye.